very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
You're in violation of secure communication procedures, Commodore.
So we just went ahead and fixed the glitch.
There is no America. There is no democracy.
Our fifth objective, a new world order.
There are no nations. There are no peoples. There are no Russians. There are no Arabs. There are no third worlds. There is no West.
Right-wing conspiracy.
What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
A new world order.
Thank you for plugging in to the Stones Unturned podcast.
Well, just a second there, Professor. We fixed the glitch.
I'm your host, Professor Thomas Henry Horan.
He reads everything.
Hello there, you magnificent bastards. Hold on. You lucky devils. How are you? Not quite ready for today's episode. Hi, Alpine. Hi, Baby Bull. So, your members only are going to see me finish this episode live on air. I love that movie. A lot of people don't know this. John Milius and Francis Ford Coppola had worked together before on Patton. They both hammered on the script for Patton. Both of those movies are about military leaders. They're tragedies about military leaders who naively assume that they're supposed to be winning the war. And they're not. And this is their tragedy. I like both of those movies. We will talk about the real Colonel Kurtz. A lot of people think Tony Poe, Anthony Poshepny, was the real Colonel Kurtz. Milius said the screenplay is based on stories he heard from a lot of guys he knew who went to Vietnam. I don't remember what Milius did. Conan the Barbarian, Machine Gun Kelly with Charles Bronson. Milius is very interesting. It's very interesting to read interviews with Milius. So those two movies, right? And what I love about Apocalypse Now is, and what I love about The Godfather is, The Godfather is supposed to be an anti-mafia movie. Patton is supposed to be a hatchet job on George Patton. But Coppola, from interviews, he seemed to think that if you told the truth about people, if you told the truth about Patton, people would get it. That movie won a lot of sympathy for Patton. He thought The Godfather was a bad guy. He thought Don Corleone was a bad guy. But he presents that the book is soap opera trash. But the movie, he supposedly is supposed to be an anti-mafia movie. So my point, I guess, is Coppola in particular seems to make that effort to see things from the main character's point of view, even though he doesn't like that main character necessarily. Does that make sense? So in Apocalypse Now, when Kurtz says, what do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin? Well, hypocrisy, right? But he seems to not be familiar with the concept of hypocrisy. He's the true believer. Kurtz is evil because he's the true believer. If Patton has committed sins, it's because he thinks, and Kurtz and Patton both are under the false impression they're supposed to be winning the war. Well, the real life Colonel Kurtz was ordered twice by Douglas MacArthur to stop winning the war. We will talk about him when we talk about Zodiac and Hal Snook. But I thought that's great. So when he says, what do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin? It's almost like he doesn't know what to call it. And that he can't. The response to hypocrisy among most of us and among everybody else in that movie is cynicism. There's a cynicism. And Captain Miller, No. Miller, Marlowe. Captain Miller, right? Martin Sheen. He's the ultimate cynic, right? He's in it for himself. He says he comes to admire Kurtz because he could have gone for general, but he went for himself instead. And in the novel Heart of Darkness, because you're hearing that story, when you read Heart of Darkness, it's one of Marlowe's friends telling you the story of this time that Marlowe told a story. Okay? It's a double frame narrative. It's crazy. Which brings us back to Moby Dick. You finished reading Moby Dick, right? I've given you 3 or 4 years to finish reading Moby Dick. It's a whale of a book. And I also highly recommend that you read The Scarlet Letter. They're both fantastic novels. They're both deeply, deeply steeped. It's about the French in Vietnam. I think that segment kind of drags down the movie. I think it really drags down the movie. Because it's an attempt, it supposedly shows Willard, Captain Willard, him feeling some empathy for the French, but Willard's in it for himself. So the Marlowe tells you that he went out to the Congo to try to, who am I? Could I do this kind of thing? And from what he hears about Kurtz, the closer he gets to Kurtz, is he doesn't say he sees himself in Kurtz. But we, listening to the story, begin to realize he begins to identify with Kurtz in various ways. He thinks he does. Then he meets Kurtz and he recoils in horror. But in the book, when it's all over, Marlowe has to go find Kurtz's intended, his fiancée. They hadn't gotten married. And he has to deliver the final effects, personal effects. And according to Marlowe tells us that Kurtz's last words are the horror, the horror. And he tells the demi-widow, see, they were never married. He tells her his last words were of you, which would be a nice, sweet, comforting thing to say to this young lady. But we know what Kurtz's final words supposedly were. The horror, the horror. What's the horror? And Marlowe talks about how he tells the story on the company yacht while they're tied up in the dock, and they're going to go on a company cruise around the English Channel to the company's offices, and Marlowe is the skipper. He's the most experienced sailor. They're all ex-sailors, but he's the skipper of the boat, the company yacht. And he tells them this story while they're waiting for the turn of the tide. And he tells them, I don't know what this story means. Maybe you can tell me what this story means. And he tells them the story of this experience that he has. That's why it's a terrible movie. It has to be a book. But they turn it into a good movie. They use it as a basis for a good movie. Okay? And there's the same thing. Willard begins to admire Kurtz up to a certain point, and then he's a little bit bewildered when he finally meets Kurtz. But we see throughout the movie, Willard has become cynical. The beginning of the movie, Harrison Ford is good at these. He does the same thing in The Conversation. In The Conversation, we don't know if Harrison Ford is a good guy or a bad guy, and we never find out. Is he on the side of the director, or is he against the director? Are some things better for the director not to know? And Robert Duvall is great, is this distant director. And Robert Duvall is in Apocalypse Now. The guy who's in it he loves war. He just loves war. He's a natural born warrior. He's Achilleus. What's he going to do when the war is over? That kind of thing. What's Patton going to do when the war is over? He's got nothing else to do. What would Hitler do if he survived the war? Kind of a thing. So all of this goes back to ego. The ego of the maniacal dictator, the charismatic guerrilla leader, But it seems to be there's a difference between Kurtz and Willard. Has become cynical. There's that meeting with Harrison Ford, and then there's there's a general commanding SOG, and there's the CIA man. And they are instructing Willard to assassinate a brother officer. Not just any U.S. military officer. Special Forces. A guy that they all admired, clearly, but felt had gone around the bend. Well, he went around the bend because he thought he's supposed to be winning the war. Do they want him eliminated because he's gone crazy, or do they want him eliminated because he's winning the war? They tell Willard he's committing war crimes, they must be stopped, and then all they do is commit war crimes, so that can't be the reason, right? But he's listening to the tapes. He's listening to the tapes of Kurtz. Kurtz becomes a podcaster. This is all based on a real guy from World War II, who was Hal Snook's commanding officer for a while. Martin Sheen is Special Forces, Green Beret, assigned to, he's been seconded to the CIA for other missions. The guy in the tie who says terminate with extreme prejudice, he's the CIA man. And when you realize what they're doing, they aren't comfortable with this. And especially the general and the captain, whoever, Harrison Ford, they're not comfortable. They know what they're doing. They're contemplating the assassination of a brother officer. And for the rest of the movie, Willard is trying to figure out, do they want him dead because he's a dangerous war criminal, or do they want him dead because he's winning the war? Because he is winning the war in his sector. Did Kurtz go loco? Or was he simply unable to become cynical? It's pretty clear from the version of the story we hear from Marlowe's friend. Marlowe has become cynical by the end of his voyage, and Kurtz has not. Somebody else said it's always the best people who do the most harm in the world. The true believers. Well, tonight in the members only, no wonder. Now we'll all sit around and wait for 5 more minutes. You must watch the direct. No, you don't want to watch the director's cut of Apocalypse Now, actually. It's too long. The sequence where you feel all this pity for the French colonials is too. It interferes with the movie, I think. And it undercuts the whole message that Captain Willard is a cynic. He thinks he identifies with Kurtz because they're both warriors, and they go for being the ultimate warrior kind of thing. But when he meets Kurtz and see what this thing has turned into, he loses faith in Kurtz. That kind of thing. In the novel, it's even more subtle that he's come to worship Kurtz the way, because in the book, it's all about the money. It's all interesting. Kurtz has violated the company ethic, and he has ruined trade in that sector of the colony, and that's why the company is down on him, not because he did anything evil. So, which is worse, right? Right, Kurtz never loses faith, but Willard does. And that seems to be Marlowe. Marlowe seems to be able to step outside himself and look at himself as a Kurtz worshiper, to a certain extent. Without saying that, we kind of get that sense. It's like the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. The narrator is telling you the story of the time he was stopped on the street by a homeless guy and harangued about killing this albatross. That's what that poem is about. It's a frame narrative. I was on my way to a wedding, right? It is an ancient mariner, and he stopped with one of three. Me and my buddies were on our way to a wedding, and this homeless guy grabbed me and started telling me the story about how he was on this ship and he shot this albatross and disaster happened. And it's really cool. It may be unfinished on purpose, but it's about this guy who blames him. It's survivor guilt. It's about survivor guilt. But what the story's about, and its story is in the form of a poem, is about, you get the sense that the guy telling us the story was, why did he tell me this story? Why did he stop me and tell me this story? That's what the story is really about. T.S. Eliot is alive at this time. This is when all the ideals have been shattered. After it's not just poor little Wolfie Schicklgruber that had his ideals trampled on during the war, right? In a lot of ways, people said the 20s and 30s were much wilder than the 60s and 70s. I know an anthropologist did a study that said there were more shotgun weddings and out-of-wedlock births in the 1930s than at any other time in American history. And in second place was the 1880s, the so-called Victorian era. All the propaganda in the 1930s was trying to get people to straighten up a little bit. But the real life was decadence in the 30s. You know, the world had been destroyed. So now we sit here killing time. So we're going to talk about some idealistic dreamers and who they were and who they weren't. Well, here we can start. So let's start with some more myths about you-know-who and the you-know-Holocaust. Hitler and his regime passed all these new laws to exterminate the you-know-whos. This is a myth. The fact is, their so-called final solution to the Jewish problem, and we're going to talk about what the Jewish problem was, basically built on pre-existing laws and some important the stories your grandmother told you about Bonnie and Clyde. What's the DFW? Don't make me guess what the DFW is. No. First of all, not only did they use laws that were already in place, the whole thing looked legit. There was